Hello everyone. I'm gonna try sitting on the floor for right now. Do not mind the messy stuff on the floor. This is what happens when you have a kid and everything in between. It's a hot mess. So you see all the stuff on the floor. Don't pay me any attention. Hello, so I'm here to do my February wrap up. I kind of regret not doing a mid-month. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I really do, but February was a slightly chaotic, it was a slightly chaotic, I still can't get it right. It was a slightly chaotic month, and I still didn't say that word, chaotic month. Not intentional. I don't know why February felt like it was all over the place, and shortest month of the year, and it definitely felt like it. It definitely felt like it went by very, very quickly compared to January. But I do regret not doing a mid-month wrap-up, so I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible, right? I don't want this to be an excessively long video. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm dividing this up into my age categories. When I do my mid-month, I just talk about them in chronological order, but since I didn't do a mid-month, I am just going to go ahead and, sorry if you hear me scratching. It's spring, which means my eczema is flaring up. Oh gosh, I hate spring. This is such a deviation from what I'm supposed to be talking about. But when I tell y'all, I'm gonna tell you something, I hate spring. Spring is new beginnings. Everything is blooming. No, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it because my body falls apart during spring, and it's already starting. It's starting. Okay, so I am gonna divide it up into picture books. The picture books, I'm not going to really give you a star rating or review. I'm just telling you the picture books that I ended up reading. If you want my thoughts, I do share some of my picture book content over on Instagram. I then will talk about the one children's book that I ended up reading, which was a read aloud for me and my kid. Then I'll dive into the middle grade and then YA, and then I have one adult comic to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about stats. I know I said dive in, but let's talk stats really, really quick. I am going to be looking down because I do have my notebook in front of me and it has my notations here. I did end up reading 30 books in February, which was a smaller amount than I ended up reading in January, and that was due to the chaos. I do think I hit a little bit of a reading slump. Granted, some of y'all are probably going to be like, girl, a reading slump and you read 30 books. Trust me when I say a lot of those were actually picture books. I did not read as much as I typically read in terms of longer books. A great portion of those were picture books. I ended up reading 6,276 pages. I do include all pages no matter what format that's in, audio included, but I do have track of the audio. This is all by Ali's spreadsheet, Ali from Hard Book Quarter. I will always mention her whenever I'm talking about stats because without her, this would not be a thing. Y'all know this because I ain't finna keep a spreadsheet. Ali is the reason why this is even happening. 67.5 hours worth of audio. 60% of the books that I read in February were diverse. It's no surprise. I was aimed for 50-50. It's my life at this point. I ended up reading 4 YA, 12 middle grade, 11 children, and 3 adults. So in that children's, 10 of those were picture books. That's what I'm saying. Like, almost half of what I read in the month of February was picture books. So don't be like, oh my god, 30 bucks and you say you want to read some. Trust me. And 3 were adult. I read primarily physically, which is what I keep trying to aim for, is that I want physical and ebook content to go up. Not saying that I don't listen to audio. March is probably going to be a month where I listen to quite a lot more audio than usual, but 10 audio, 2 ebook, 18 physical. So trucking right along there. All right, the picture books that I ended up reading. Let's dive into that category. I read On Our Way, What a Day, When Alexander Graced the Table, To See an Owl. I don't know why I was going to have such a hard time saying it. I cannot talk. Jollof Day, The Interpreter, Paloma Flies Away, Yaldala, Good Grief, and Jolly Can, Saturday Morning at the Shop, Bianca and the Butterfly. If I had to pick a favorite from February picture books, it probably would be Saturday Morning at the Shop. That was a really, really great picture book. It's a really, really great read aloud. So if I have any parents, caregivers, educators looking for good read alouds, Saturday Morning at the Shop is excellence, like best picture book of the month. All right, let's dive into our children's category. So the only children's book or early chapter book that I ended up reading, and I should start saying early chapter book because I think I confuse people when I say children's, because I make this distinction between children and middle grade, even though it's all of it is children's literature, kid lit. 0 to 18 is all kid lit. Surprisingly, yeah, that's the truth behind it. When I say children's, I do mean early chapter books. So this is probably aimed at any age between like 5 to 8 is typically when I say early chapter. We did end up reading Rachel Friedman and 8 Not So Perfect Nights of Hanukkah. This is the second book in that series. I always comp this series for Junie B. Jones because I am not a person that is a fan of Junie B. Jones. If you know anything about me, you know automatically your girl don't rock with Junie B. I don't like her. And so I'm constantly looking for read-alikes for Junie B. Jones and read-alikes that have a variety of experiences. So this one has Jewish representation in it. I really enjoyed the first book, which I read by myself, and I decided to read this one out loud to my kid because now she's asking for actual chapter books instead of just picture books. So we'll do a chapter or two a night of our read aloud in addition to the picture books that we're reading. Now, do I feel like it's a ploy for her to be able to stay up longer? Absolutely. Am I willing to indulge her because it's an opportunity for her to hear more storytelling? Of course, but of course. This installment was really great. It's about Hanukkah, which we celebrate Christmas. And so it gave my kiddo the opportunity to learn more about Hanukkah. She was able to ask some really great questions. Rachel is struggling because she loves Hanukkah and she doesn't understand why everything is marketed towards Christmas. And she's trying to prove to her brother that Hanukkah is just as amazing as any other holiday. Her brother's older, and so he's not as engaged as he used to be. And so she tries to create this plan where she's going to have 8 perfect nights of Hanukkah. And of course, it doesn't go as planned. And so there's a series of ups and downs, some friendship challenges, and not really a lot of friendship challenges, but more so I think this was like a sibling dynamic that was brought into question and things not going the way that we plan, like having expectations and what do we do when we have to redirect those expectations. So that was a good conversation piece between me and my kid, but we enjoyed it and we ended up giving it 4 stars. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I was like, if I have to sit here and do this video, I'm gonna have some water because I'm not gonna make it. All right, let's get into the middle grade, which is the biggest section that I read in the month of February. And I am going to fly through these, y'all, because I genuinely, I cannot sit here for an hour plus and then edit the footage down. I have written a full review for most of these, so if you're curious and you want to know more explicit details, definitely check out my Goodreads. So the first thing we have is Kareem Between. This one was the National Book Award winner for Young People's Literature last year. It was last year, yes, November of last year. And it's a book written in verse. I really did enjoy it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Focuses on a main character by the name of Kareem. He is Syrian. His parents came from Syria to the United States. He was born in the US and he loves football. I think it was really interesting because we get to see this story that's interwoven with references to football, and it's okay for readers who are not familiar with football, the different positions, the plays, the variety of different things that come with the sport. It's okay, it is explained, but I do like that the sport itself was interwoven into the actual framework of the book because we have a main character who loves football, and it is a driving force in the book because he wants to try out for the football team, is unsuccessful at first, but finds out that there is a kid that he could possibly build a relationship with. He's the coach's son, and he's hoping that maybe with their relationship, he has an opportunity to try out for the team. Unfortunately, the situation turns into bullying. So there is content warning here for bullying, racism, discrimination. It's intense, and the reason why it is intense is not just because we see this bullying aspect with this kid who wants to take advantage of Kareem and use him to get his homework assignments done. Typical things I think that you would see in middle grade, but This is also taking place around the time that the Muslim ban is enacted. And so we see how this directly impacts Kareem and other people in the community. So his mother leaves the US to go get her father, who is sick. He is in need of treatment, and his mother is going to Syria to bring him back. And it's dangerous for her to go to Syria and try to make it back. And unfortunately, the Muslim ban is put into place right when she is there. And so she cannot come back into the United States, which puts her into grave danger. Kareem is also one of those characters that we see that's caught in between, which the Kareem between is is very intentional here. So he's trying to fit in and really feel the American side of his experience in life, but also not lose the Syrian aspect of who he is as a person. And so he's kind of floating in between, because he doesn't feel Syrian enough, but he also doesn't feel American enough. And like when he's talking to his grandfather, it's clear, like, you know, with language barriers, and he's learning and he's practicing, but he can tell, like, I'm not as good as communicating as I would like to be. When he goes to school, he brings, you know, traditional Syrian food. He gets made fun of for eating food that's different than what we typically see in American lunchrooms. So there is that in-between narrative. So if you're a fan of reading stories about main characters who are struggling with having multiple aspects of their identities, this is one that I definitely would recommend. I ended up, like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was enjoyable. I can see why it was chosen as the Young People's National Book Award winner. I highly recommend it. It's a quick read. I read that one physically, I believe. After that, I read a graphic novel called Drive. This one was okay. I gave it 3.5 stars. I wasn't a huge fan of the art. I thought that the history aspect of it was really interesting, because it's told in dual timeline, where we have a main character who's really interested in cars and racing, and we have another perspective that is set in the past, where we are following a woman that was attempting to break barriers when it came to race car driving, because women were not traditionally involved in the sport. There was a lot of barriers. People did not want to sponsor her. She didn't have the same quality vehicle. She didn't have the same team members that were willing to service her car in the middle of a race. And so I thought that that was interesting. But other than that, I didn't really feel like the story drew me in as a reader. And I think a lot of that had to do with the art. I think the art was so distracting to me at times that it took me out of the story, and I wasn't as focused in on it as I want it to be. It wasn't a bad read. We have this thing in the community where like a 3 or a 3.5 is essentially like, oh, it's not a good book. No, it was a solid read. A 3 or 3.5 coming from me still means it's a solid read. It's just not a new favorite, and not one that I would ever see myself readily picking up. I think that if you are looking for books for like Women's History Month, looking for books that detail women breaking barriers, especially in sports, this would be a good recommendation for you. It's not the only one that's out there, but it's one of the newer ones, and it details a sport that I don't think we often talk about when we are looking at stories where we're highlighting women who are breaking those barriers, right? So we see things like soccer or basketball, women even playing football now, women in wrestling, but I think race cars is kind of like the outlier in things that I've typically seen. So this is like my first encounter with it, and I do think it probably will be a first encounter for a lot of people. But if you have kids that are interested in race car driving, this might be something that definitely does appeal to them, or fanatics of just like car details in general, like fixing cars, like taking them apart and putting them back together. All the craze for those kids, like they will eat this up. Okay, so the next one that I ended up reading was a book that recently won the Family Schneider Book Award for middle grade. I believe it was a winner, not an honor. And it is Popcorn by Rob Harrell. I had seen this book, I just never got to it. Actually, I had been on hold for it for a minute, and I didn't look at my holds list on my Libby account I rarely do. I don't need to. It shocks me. It really does shock me when I see my holds list on Libby. It's unfortunate. But I realized, okay, well, I had the book on hold and I hadn't realized I'd been waiting on it for a while. And so finally it did come through and I was able to read it in February. Such a great book. I did not read the description of it. I knew it was going to deal with disability representation because the Family Schneider Book Award recognizes outstanding children's literature that has disability representation in it. And so that's all I knew. Outside of that, I could not tell you anything about this book. And I'm happy that I went in not knowing anything. So it focuses on a main character by the name of Andrew. And Andrew literally is going to school for picture day. He has anxiety and he also has OCD. And so you do see that representation on page. I know for some people who have anxiety or have OCD, sometimes it can be too much to see that on page. It is very much so detailed. I think that for me, as someone who doesn't deal with either one of those things, it was a good insight to see what that experience could be like. Rob did not write this, I should say this, Rob did not write this as if this one experience was indicative of all experiences with OCD and anxiety. That's not the way he wrote it, but I do think that for someone like me who doesn't have that experience at all, it was really, really good insight. So we're following Andrew, who's literally just trying to go to school to have picture day. And it's like a series of unfortunate events that happen, which I don't want to spoil any of them. But there's so many different things at play here where Andrew is dealing with a bully. He is dealing with a grandmother who has Alzheimer's. That grandmother does unfortunately go missing at some point, and it's hard for him. So that was the other element that I think I really appreciated, is the relationship between Andrew and his grandmother, and really showing not just the love that Andrew has for his grandmother, but how frustrating it is for a kid to have to become used to an adult that they've known, right, for their whole life, now having Alzheimer's and doing things that do stress the family out. And it's no fault of anyone involved. But I think frustration and anger are real emotions that kids can feel in very sensitive situations. And sometimes people feel like they shouldn't have those emotions, or they don't allow them to have those emotions, and they're very valid. Because when, you know, your mother has to do X, Y, and Z because your grandmother needs a caretaker, or you're constantly worried because your grandmother will go missing, or you're worried because your grandmother says things to you that she would have never said to you, there is going to be some anger and frustration there. And so I thought it was very well done. Andrew is just a loving character. It's very almost like a slice of life narrative. We're just following him through the course of this experience. And I felt for Andrew, because literally I was like, this kid is just trying to take a picture. He just is trying to take a picture. And the way that he talks about his OCD through his OCD and anxiety through these diary entries is like so amazing. And the analogy for your anxiety being like popcorn popping until eventually you just explode open because it's just too much going on at one time. And we do get to see him navigate an old relationship that turns into a bullying relationship because of something that happened that one person held on to, and not realizing like, oh, like that made you upset. So it's also like not having the skill set to effectively communicate those emotions, going back to like those middle grade age kids who almost like revert back to toddler and preschool ages, where they're learning how to communicate effectively with all of these big emotions, and they revert right back to that. So not knowing that there was an issue with a friend because the friend didn't communicate it, and now you have this conflict, now there's bullying involved. It was a really, really good storytelling. And I know that Rob has another book called Wink, and I do want to read that one. But I thought the characterization was great. These, you know, Andrew I absolutely adored, but then the side characters too were multifaceted, and I really appreciate an author that can create great characters, dynamic personalities. Like, I love that. So like I said, 4 stars. The next one that I ended up reading was a middle grade fantasy, and that was Jaden Powers and the Inheritance Magic. Now, I'd been meaning to read this one. I ended up picking this one up because it had been on my radar, and I also needed to read it for work. This is another magic boarding school book, and so I'm going to say right off the bat, you're going to find a lot of those tropes. They're going to be common. It's not that it's a bad thing, because a trope is a trope is a trope. You're going to see it everywhere. But I just want to give that heads up, because I feel like people will come at this in a way that's a little bit more harsh, because once you've read a lot of middle grade magic boarding school books, they may start to feel the same, and that's because they're utilizing the same trope. So if that is you, I implore you, take a break from those books before you dive into this one. So I did end up giving this one 3.5 stars. In my review, I do note what I just said, right? It doesn't make it a bad book that it uses some of the same elements that you've seen before. I think that this one kind of lacked the punch that I needed for it to stand out amongst the crowd. I do think it had some unique elements, but I wanted it to have a little bit more, and I wanted it to carry out some themes that it started in the beginning of the book all the way to the end, which it didn't. And that's more so about the relationship dynamics between our kids and the parents and caregivers. That kind of felt like it fell off towards the end, and I just had some lingering questions. But the things that did work really well in this is that it did have a very interesting magic system. So we're following a main character by the name of Jaden, who has a really, really close friend. Don't ask me to remember names right now, okay? I remember Jaden because it's in the title, all right? But he's really, really close friends with this other kid. I mean, they are like this. They're bread and butter, fruit to my loop, right? And something goes wrong with Jaden's friend. And it is, and I'm going to be careful about how I word this because I don't know if this is in synopsis. It's devastating to Jaden. And he then finds out that his friend was actually a part of this magical world. And he now, all of a sudden, after reading something that his friend left him, he has these magical abilities. And so he goes to this school where he's exposed to this entire magical world that his friend supposedly was a part of. However, when he gets there, there are some people saying some really interesting thing about his friend that he just doesn't believe to be true, and that there's something that's more sinister at play. I loved the love that was expressed between these two boys, right? I think that toxic masculinity is a very real thing. And I think that sometimes we do not permit our boys to feel. They are shamed away from feeling. They are shamed away from expressing love for their close friends. That adoration that I would be devastated if anything ever happened to you. I will cry over you. I will fight for you. Like that love that can exist between two boys. And I love so much that that was a strong part of the narrative, right? Their love for each other is a huge driving force for this entire book. And I love that we got to see this, especially because it's between two Black boys. And I needed that. I needed that desperately. I thought it was my absolute, and not I thought, I know it is my absolute favorite aspect of this book. And I don't know if we're going to get a second book in this series, but I hope so, because I really would love that dynamic to be explored more. Like I said, there is an interesting magic system to this that I'm not going to get into because it is revealed later on within the story, and I do think it's a spoiler. I'd never seen that before, and so I thought that like stuff like that where I was like, oh, that's unique, I've never seen that. I wish that we got more of those things and to make it more of a standout book. But I thought it was enjoyable, and if a second book is ever released, I definitely will pick it up. I ended up giving that one 3.5 stars. Okay, so the next one that I have is All the Blues in the Sky by Renee Watson. This is one of my absolute favorite reads of the month, and the one after this is another one. I love this book. I love this book so much. I don't even know how to describe how much I love this book. I would be very mindful of stepping into this one. This one heavily deals with grief, as it was a way for Renee Watson to express how much grief she's had to deal with since the start of the pandemic and how many people she's lost. The opening dedication is to I'm going to get the wording wrong, but essentially it was somewhere along the lines of to everyone who's lost someone and to everyone who will. So it's this fact that all of us at some point in our life, we're going to experience grief, right? And that should have been my warning sign, like she finna tear my ass up, but no, I didn't really listen. And so this one had me at my desk at work bawling my eyes out. I typically do not do that with books, but oh my gosh. So it focuses on a main character who at the beginning of the book, we find out she's in grief counseling, and she's in grief counseling because she lost her best friend, and she lost her best friend on her birthday, and she blames herself. And this is a very, very short book, so there's not much detail I can give you, but my God, she talks so much about how her grief is different. And it is. There's different ways I think that we experience grief, right? Her grief she felt different from her counterparts, the other kids in her grief group, because her grief came without notice. Everyone else in the group knew that the person that they cared for was in the midst of making a transition. She had no forewarning. She wasn't given time to prepare. And so for her, it feels different. She's struggling with the idea of making new friends because it feels like betrayal to her best friend. She is struggling with the idea that, how do I ever celebrate a birthday again? And we watch her go through every single piece and part of this. And it is one of the most devastating books that I've ever read in my life, and so beautifully done. And I don't want to get emotional about it, but it's so hard for me not to get emotional, like talking about this book, because one of the things that Renee Watson points out is that grief never goes away. And I've lost so much personally in the past year. I've lost 3 family members in the past year. And the feeling, the piece of you that is empty, you feel their absence, it never, ever, ever, it doesn't go away. You learn how to live with your grief. And I didn't think I understood that until reading this book, where it never is going to go away, and you will experience more grief. And it's a part of the human experience that I think we all collectively share. No matter how different we may be, right? Like grief is a common denominator amongst us all. And so, gosh, I did not want to get emotional talking about a book. This is not what I planned. But 5 stars, I'm going to stop talking about it, because if I keep talking about the book, I'm going to continue to cry. Such a beautifully done book. I cannot recommend it enough. Please read it. The next 2 books I'm not going to talk about because I did a 72-hour weekend, or 48 hour. Was it 48 hours? It was a 48-hour weekend reading vlog just to see how much I could read during the weekend. And during that weekend, I read The Other Side of Tomorrow, which was a middle grade graphic novel. I gave that 5 stars. And then I read another graphic novel, The Firelight Apprentice, which I gave 3 stars. And then I also read Mixed Up. I know I said 2, but I forgot I read Mixed Up too. And that was a middle grade graphic novel that talked about dyslexia. Really, really good. If you want to hear my thoughts, make sure you check out that vlog. And I gave that one 4 stars. So the next one that I have to talk about is Old School by Gordon Corman. Gordon Corman is a well-known name in like the kid lit arena, right? Everybody knows who Gordon Corman is. He is a phenomenal human. And I don't know this man personally. He's a phenomenal human. I don't know this man personally, but he's a phenomenal writer. And I think that he does such a good job tapping into what kids love to read. And so I read his latest book, which is Old School. I probably will be reading a couple more of his books throughout the rest of the year. And I've read several of his books before, and they're always great. His covers never really make sense. I mean, they do make sense, but I think the covers will throw you off when you look at them because he never uses people. Well, maybe in his Mastermind series, I think he uses people on the cover, but that's the sci-fi series. His contemporary series, I don't feel like he ever uses humans on the covers. And lately, I don't know if it's his choice or his publisher's choice, they often use animals on the covers. And so if you look at the cover, you're like, oh, this is about an animal. It's not. It is in fact about a human. So this is about a little boy who lives in a retirement facility with his grandmother. So his parents they're around, but things happen and his grandmother ends up taking him, and she puts him in, she grows up in the retirement community. And so his best friends are people who are definitely old enough to be his grandparents or great grandparents, right? And he very much so behaves like an elderly person. He doesn't know any different. And the only reason why they get caught is because when she filled out the application for who was going to be living there, she put his age down as 60 instead of 6, I think. And there was this discrepancy about like, if he was this age, why was he not collecting his Social Security benefits? And so they came looking for him, and then they found out like, you have to be in school. So he goes to school for the first time, and it is a shell shock for him and everyone around him, because they're like, why does he operate like an old man? But he just is so great. Like, he's such a lovable main character, and the kids grow used to him, and he grows acclimated to the idea of having friends his age. And, you know, he struggles a little bit because his best friend is 99 years old, and, you know, we know how that goes and how that turns out. But it is very much so, it's a coming of age story of sorts. But not really. It kind of is, because in some ways we have this kid who's learning what it's like to make friends, to be in school, and it's very new to him, and it's a whole adjustment, and he has to get used to it, and he finds this community that he doesn't expect to find. I thought it was so heartwarming, and that's not what I expected, right? Because Gordon Corman has a way of inserting humor into the things that he writes, and so I was expecting it to be funny, but there was a seriousness to it, a level of just, I don't know, like tugging on your heartstrings in ways that you did not expect. Not in the same way with Renee Watson's, where I was like a blubbering mess, but still, like, it was like oh, I just want to pinch your cheeks and give you a big hug, like that type of heartwarming. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars. After that, I ended up reading a middle grade horror, which that's probably one of my weakest areas of genre in this age category. Is that, like, it's horror. It's definitely horror. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that I'm not as well versed in it as I probably should be. And so I'm trying to pick up more so that I can give better recommendations. So I read not 16. Gosh, I wrote that weird. I was like 16. Why would I read that? It Watches in the Dark. Look at that cover. Look at that cover. Look at that cover. Okay, this book was weird. It was a heck of a ride. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. This is my first time experiencing Jeff Strand. I've never read anything by him. I feel like he typically does adult stuff, but last year he tapped into the middle grade scene and started writing horror for that age group. And I must admit, not a bad job, okay? I'm very interested in continuing on the rest of the series. I think this is going to be an episodic series, so each book is going to focus on different characters and different scenarios. In this specific one, we have a brother and sibling duo who are out with their dad, and things go left, and they end up in this town searching for assistance. And they were how do I explain this? They're trying to get help for the dad, and they're trying to figure out what exactly is wrong with this town, because that's the way it always starts, right? What is wrong with this town? So when they get to the town after this accident happens with their dad, they're out fishing, they're out on a boat doing something, and they're trying to get assistance. The townsfolk are strange, and they keep referencing them being from the outside, and so it takes a second for our main character to click, like, what do you mean, like on the outside? Like, you know, we just want to get help for our dad. And then you find out that they are helping their dad. I don't want to spoil this, because part of the joy in reading this was the reveals, but I will tell you, there's a giant scarecrow that is in the town, and let me tell you something, it does not go the way you think it's going to go, right? You are getting this idea, especially when things start going left, you get this perception of things, and boy was I wrong. And then the ending, I was like, so we just gonna end it like that? It reminded me so much of like the Goosebumps like TV show, where you think it's done, it's not really done, or like Tales from the Crypt, like that type of 90s kid vibe, right? Like the old, not the new Goosebumps stuff, the old Goosebumps stuff. It was so good. I really enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, I'm about to go check out the second book, because I really did enjoy it. It was a time was had. I also ended up reading Radiance. I gave this one 3 stars. This is a new release. This is my first time experiencing this author. This is a historical fiction book that focuses on a young girl young black girl, this is in the 60s, goes to school at a predominantly white institution, and, well, she doesn't go to PWI, but she goes to predominantly white school. And it heavily deals with her trying to understand the complexities of race, right? I struggle with this one because I think that the way that she was constructed as a character, she's dealing with some internalized racism that was hard for me, and I'm not the intended audience, so don't think that this impacted my rating of it, right? So she's dealing with some internalized racism in how she views herself, and I think that can be kind of hard to process, but I do think it was a good historical fiction about a little girl who is navigating her schooling experience, going to a school that has been integrated, dealing with a kid that is racist, that has some life-changing events happen, and he has to learn some hard lessons. I don't know. I think this is one that I have to give a little bit more thought to, because I'm not sure how to feel about it, because it is written, this one, I don't know. I know this is weird, because I never really do this, where I come and I sit down and I'm talking about a book and I don't have clear-cut ideas of how I feel about a book, but I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm not sure how to feel about this one, because there's an absolution given to a kid that I think was horrible to the main character. And granted, a lot of things that kids pick up, right, are based off of the experiences that they have within the household. And I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that he was lashing out due to some things that were happening in his household. I just don't like the way he treated her, right? And I felt like our main character had to forgive him because of what he had gone through, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. That is the aspect of this book that I think I had a difficult time with. I like that it's historical fiction. I like that we're talking about complex themes and what the reality was like of being black, living in that time as a kid who would have been, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? But that aspect of the book, and I may need to go back and reread it. It's one of those where I think I need to revisit it again to get a better idea. I did give it 3 stars on Goodreads, and I feel like, and I didn't even write a review for it. That's probably why my thoughts do feel a little bit more jumbled than they typically do, because of the fact that this is one that I think I struggle with a little bit. The last middle grade book that I ended up reading was Meticulous Jones and the Skull Tattoo. I ended up giving this one 3 stars as well, or maybe it was 3.5. It's either 3 or 3.5. I don't trust my notes on this one because I feel like I gave it a 3.5. This one had a very interesting premise. It is a new to me author. I don't know if she's written anything else, but it follows a main character, Meticulous Medi, who is a part of this world where the magic system is pretty unique, right? Your fate or who you will be in the future is determined by this marking that you get at a certain age. And so she ends up getting a skull tattoo, meaning that she will be a bringer of death. She's going to be a murderer. And it shocks everyone. And she is moved to a different household to protect her. I think her father is doing his best in an attempt to protect her, but then there's some things that go wrong. And there's some people who may be after her and her father, because her father goes missing. And so her aunt takes her in. This is for me where the story started to go a little left, where the execution started to falter. So many of the problems that she had could have been solved if her aunt would have been forthcoming about information. Her aunt withholds so much from her, and part of it was unnecessarily held information. So that was a piece of the puzzle that I struggle with. I do think that in terms of the world building, there's some really cool elements, especially the friend that she makes. There's a reveal and I was like, jaw drop, because that's not what I was anticipating. But I think the pacing wasn't even, and so there were parts of the book that I was really, really into, and then there were parts of the book where I was like, this is low-key kind of boring. So unevenly paced, the execution wasn't perfect. I did like the characters. The lack of communication, like miscommunication, I think is a norm for this age group. It is not my favorite thing to see amongst adults. If you know anything about my adult romance, I struggle with miscommunication trope. In kidlit, I'm a little bit more forgiving because I do think that that is a part of their development, right? The inability to effectively communicate. It's there. As adults, I don't give as much grace. And so to see an adult, it is not necessarily miscommunication, but seeing an adult that is not effectively communicating, it's hard. And I know what she was trying to do, because there's sometimes you withhold information to protect your kids, but just the way it was written, it didn't really work for me. So that's why I ended up giving that one. I think it was 3.5, but I could be very, very wrong about that, but I think it was 3.5. All right, on to YA. So I read 4 young adult books. The first one I read was Breed with Love. I'm not going to talk about that one because it is also part of that 48 hour, I keep saying 72. It was part of that 48. It was part of that 48-hour reading vlog, so I'm not going to go into it, but I did end up giving that one a 3.5 stars. I read 3 other YA books, A Language of Dragons. I read 2 very controversial. They're going to end up being controversial YA books. And to be quite honest, I may need to do a more detailed video talking about these 2 books and talking about YA books as a whole. So Language of Dragons is people are tagging it as romantasy. Everything doesn't have to be romantasy, okay? Everything doesn't have to be that at all. And I think it has certain implications for tagging YA books as romantasy, but that's just me. And I have my thoughts for that. I have reasons for that. But it takes place in an alternate version of our world in 1923. If I see another reviewer say that I'm so confused as to this doesn't feel like World War I, World War II, it's not supposed to be either. Those wars happened before and after. 1923, there was no war. in history, right? Okay, we're gonna just start there because I can't, I'm confused as to reviews that are saying that. All right, yes, it takes place at Bletchley Park, which we know, big part in decoding information in the war effort in history, but we're not talking about World War I or World War II. This is particularly in between. It's intentional that it is in between the two wars, and we're in a society in which people are divided by a class system, and class one being, of course, the better of the three. We're focusing on a main character who literally has been conditioned to believe the system that she is a part of is working and is effective and is best for everyone. And so yes, she does a really shitty thing and hurts a friend, and no, she doesn't get it, because this is what I keep seeing in the reviews. I'm sorry, the way this book has been reviewed really frustrates me, because people are reviewing this book as if it is an adult title. It is not. It is young adult. We have a teenager. Now, sometimes is our ethereal tone misguiding? Yes, but it is a teen, right? It is a teenager whose frontal lobe has not been fully developed yet, correct? And I also hate that this book is being comped for Fourth Wing and Babel, because those are adult titles. This is not an adult title, and I'm gonna rant about this a little bit. It is mismarketing, and I don't like it, because people are being drawn to this book that are not compensating for the fact that you are not the intended audience. All right, so you have a main character who's making really crappy decisions, who believes the system that she's in is correct because she's been conditioned by her parents as well as the system to believe that it is a system that works, because some of you are living in a system right now that you think works because you've been conditioned to believe that it does. But we're not going to go there. We're not going to talk about that, are we? We don't want to touch on those real facts just yet. I'm not saying you can't like a book. I'm not saying you can't like a book, but I there's certain things that I like. Approaching kidlit is so different than approaching an adult title, because it's not intended for us. So she makes stupid decisions. Expected. She starts a war. Unexpected. And she starts a war because there is a contract between humans and dragons, and she unfortunately breaks that contract. And so now she's being brought on board to help the government possibly fight the dragons, fight a human dragon coalition that is rising up against some other dragons and the humans. And granted, the biggest criticism I keep saying is, oh, she doesn't make the right choice. She's not ever going to, not when you've been conditioned to believe in a system, right? When you're being conditioned to believe in a system, deconstruction doesn't happen overnight. Deconstruction doesn't even happen over 1 year. It takes some people a lifetime to deconstruct the things that they've been brainwashed into thinking actually works. Right? So of course she makes crappy decisions. She's selfish. She's self-centered, as she should be. She's a teenager, and her back is up against the wall, and so she's going to make the best decisions for her to survive. I was hesitant on where I felt on this one, where I was going to fall in terms of how I felt about this book, but the author is a linguist, and it's clear that she is, because this book is about the power of language. Our main character is interested in dragon languages and becoming a person that deals with languages. She is a polyglot, and she wants to continue to study these dragon languages, not understanding that language is also cultural, right? Languages are not just something that you just take and piece apart, because there are nuances to languages that are beyond translation. And that's the point of this. Language is something that can be manipulated also for power, use of power. It can be used for propaganda. And it amazed me to see so many reviews about this book, and it's like, whew, the point just flew right over. Flat, 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 flat. Flat, 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 flat. Just like, I think this was well done. And I probably gave such a nonsensical review about this book because I really have some thoughts and feelings about how teen literature is treated nowadays, as if it's supposed to be for grown folks like me. And it's disheartening. This book is very much so a reflection of everything that we are seeing right now. Is it set in a fantasy time? Does everything necessarily make sense at all times? No, but I do think this is the first book and it's a debut, and I do think that she has some room to expand and grow her world building skills. But for the most part, like, the way that she laid this out, the dragon and human relationships, and saw someone say like, well, I don't understand why everyone else was getting along with the dragons and this one place couldn't. I'm gonna let you sit and think on that one for a little while, because I want you to take that and apply that to the human experience, and I promise you to make so much more sense. It really will. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I gave it 4 stars. I'm gonna stop. I'm just gonna stop. After that, I ended up reading The Rose Bargain, and I feel like my SD card is about to fill up again, and it's just a shame because I'm almost at the finish line. Another one that's gonna have conflicting views, because your mileage is going to vary on this one depending upon how you view young adults, right? And how you feel about physical intimacy in young adult books. But that's beside the point. I don't even think I'm going to get into that part doing this video. I don't think I want to even touch that. I keep changing the angle because I keep having to deal with the SD card. I need another SD card. All right. We were talking about The Rose Bargain. The Rose Bargain is another young adult. This one does feel more fantasy romance. A Language of Dragons, not so much, because I don't feel like romance was a huge aspect of it. Actually, I don't even feel like I told y'all what the book was about. I feel like I just gave you my heated points about that book. So let's go back. I'm going to go back really quick and talk about the fact that that book definitely follows a main character who accidentally starts a war between dragons and a human dragon coalition. And she is brought onto a team with other individuals who have upset the powers that be and that society, who are forced to be a part of this team that is given secret projects. And while she's there, she's learning more about what the true intentions of this class system is. And I think that one of my criticisms of this book is that I wish we would have gotten a little bit more information about how the class system was established, because it does read as though there's only 1 or 2 elements that make the classes different from each other. But I think that she could have given just a little bit more detail about that. And so she has to learn to make decisions or really question whether she's going to make decisions that's going to benefit her and her family, or if it's going to benefit the greater good of society. Because at the end of the day, when she is supposed to be expressing interest in going to university for her interest in learning more dragon languages, her mother, her father, and her uncle are all arrested. Oh, and her cousin. They're all arrested. And so she makes these rash decisions because she wants to save her family. But she has to weigh, do I save my family or do I save my country? And to be a teenager and having to make that decision and your back is up against the wall, it's kind of hard, especially when your sister is missing. You don't know what's going on with her. There's a lot of emotional pieces and parts to this. And I will say that the end of this book did a little something to me that I did not anticipate in terms of my feelings. It did hurt my feelings a little bit. And I was actually shocked that I was disappointed by that. I don't think that this is a good comp for Fourth Wing or Babel at all. And I think that it needs to just stand the test of time on its own and not rely on those comps. The Rose Bargain. This book definitely is more fantasy romance. We're following a main character who is a part of this this one's interesting to me too, because I went into this one not really, I didn't know what to expect. Once again, not really reading the synopsis. This is a historical fantasy romance. It's a blending of all 3 genres. I think it's very interesting because we're looking at the English monarchy, but in the transition of rulers, we have a fairy come and take over, and she becomes the Fae Queen of this English monarchy. And the way that it's set up is that every citizen is guaranteed the ability to make a trade with the Fae Queen, where you can make a wish and she'll grant you the wish, but you have to pay her something in return. What you pay her is solely up to her discretion, right? Some people are saying like, I wish that I'll get straight A's in every test that I take for the rest of my life. And she may say, you have to pay me with your 2 front teeth. And so that's your debt to her. So we have a main character whose sister was a part of this means for the Fae Queen to her son to find a wife. Her sister goes and she is doing this to save her family. Her family doesn't have much of anything left, and she feels like if she marries the Fae Queen's son, that will make her royalty. Her family can have their titles and lands, wealth, abundance. Once again, making the sacrifice for the better good of my family. So there's this competition where you have young girls who are entering in order to impress not only him, but the Fae Queen, and possibly end up married. When I tell you this book is full of twists and turns, right? Not any that I was expecting. Interesting character development, because we're not only getting our main character's perspective, but there's some side characters too, who you get to learn a little bit about, and then you learn their motivations as to why they're even in this competition, and how they view our main character. And it's gut-wrenching at times, because you're like, dang, like, it's amazing what people will do when they have no options left. It strips you of your humanity in some ways. And I think that this is a good example of when your humanity is brought into question, because what would you do? How hard would you fight? There is kind of a love triangle of sorts. Not really, to be honest, and I can't tell you why, because the ending of this book had my jaw literally unhinged and on the floor. Nothing. I was not expecting it, and I knew that other people had said that. But when I tell you it's nothing that you could possibly ever see coming, I genuinely do mean that. It's nothing that you could I don't know how you could see it coming. So there's that. She did a very good job. She did a very, very good job with that aspect of it. But she's supposed to be falling for the prince, but there's a brother, and they end up having a little bit more of a connection than what they anticipated. And so there is a romance that kind of ensues between them, where she's also supposed to be courting his brother. But my goodness gracious, let me tell you, because that ending still I cannot wait for the second book. I can't believe that book just came out, and then we probably have to wait like another year before the second book comes out. That I cannot believe. I do think that it had its flaws, right? Pacing sometimes was not always there. I do think that the last part of the book was definitely more engaging than the first part. You will see some things that you have seen before in some fantasy romances, but I do think that this one is unique, right? Once again, a trope is a trope is a trope. The historical fantasy romance is not common in young adult literature. So seeing that for me was like, oh, okay, this is something that I think teens would enjoy. They would enjoy this. I think with this one, because of content, for me, I would personally recommend the 16 and up. If you go, there's Goodreads reviews that kind of talk about this, and I have my thoughts about it, but I'm not going to delve into it today. I liked the book, okay? It was a success for me. It was 4 stars. This is the better YA reading experience, because last month I read quite a few YA and I had some duds. And in this round in reading YA, I only had I only had one that was below 4 stars, and it was a 3.5. So that's good. The last young adult book that I ended up reading was Anna and the French Kiss, which my copy is over there somewhere. And you know what? I'm not getting up to get it. This was a reread for me. This book came out in 2010. I did not realize this book was 15 years old this year. It held up. I'm shocked it held up. Anna is sent to Paris because her dad sends her there, and she's going to the American school in Paris, where she meets a host of different characters. She ends up becoming close with Etienne, And unfortunately, there are some feelings that are there that can't be explored because she thinks she likes somebody at home. He has a partner. The relationship is really, really toxic and unhealthy, but he still is attached to someone. And so it's them not really being honest with themselves and with each other. And it is very coming of age, slice of life, very cute, very typical teenage stuff. I think that the issue that we're seeing in YA now is not an issue that we necessarily saw in YA during this time period, right? YA during this time period felt very YA. It was very much so written for a young adult audience. I think where I struggle with YA now is that I think there is some encouragement to not only age up, but we are finding adult books, because I know this has been some conversations, we are finding adult books that have been sold as young adult books because of who's writing them. And I think that that is a disservice to all parties involved, because it takes an age category away from a group of, a group of kids that really do need it. And when I say a group of kids, I mean this age group that needs literature that reflects their experiences. And so reading this for me was just like, yeah, this is what young adult used to be. And this is what it should be, where it does read very YA. You know how much I love that phrase. It reads very YA because it's supposed to be for a young adult audience, and I really appreciated that. So not really much there to discuss. Like, I will be continuing on with the series. I don't know when. Hopefully this year, because I don't want to go into 2026 having not finished the trilogy. I may just go ahead and just finish it out. But 4 stars. It was a good reread. I was surprised it held up. I really was. I mean, there were a couple of things here and there was like, but I think overall it wasn't one of those books that I explored 15 years later and I'm like, woo, wow. So not bad, Stephanie Perkins. All right, the 2 adult things I'm going to talk about, of course, they're always graphic novels, comics. I did read one adult book in February, but my patrons have already, I read Deep End. If you're just curious, I did read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, but my patrons ended up getting a exclusive vlog attached to that, and I don't talk about my adult reads over here. So I did read The Remarried Empress, Volume 6, 5 stars. Can't really tell you much about that one because it's Volume 6. It's really good. I feel like every volume that I keep getting into now, I have loved. I've read Volume 7 already for March, 5 stars. The series just keeps getting better and better. I mean, I started off with giving volumes 4 stars, but I think once I hit the volume 5 mark, it has been 5 stars for every single volume. So that's always good to see. And then I also ended up reading New Masters. This was a comic book club pick for the month of February. We all thought that it was a great start. We can tell that the writers are young, not young. We don't know if they're young. They're new. We could tell that the writer was newer to comic book writing just because so many of us at this point, through our own reading experiences or through the comic book club, you can tell the difference between a newer writer and a more seasoned writer. And we thought it was a good start to a series, Afrofuturistic, fun, a lot of great social commentary, but definitely needed just a little bit of work. And we're hoping that we'll see another volume in the series, but unfortunately it was grant funded. I can't remember the name. I think it was creators, like it was basically a way for creators to support other creators, and it was a grant funded project. So I don't know if we'll ever get anything else out of this, but I gave it 3.5 stars. I will link the live show in the description above so you can hear more about our thought processes when reviewing that book or discussing that book. But that's it, y'all. My mouth is so dry. I know y'all are like, girl, drinking water on camera. Listen, I got to do what I got to do to survive. It was a good reading month. I will be doing a mid-month in March because today is the 3rd day of March and I don't even want to tell you how many things I've read. Slump is over. So full reading mojo is back. It's middle grade March So that means that I'm trying to really pack a punch this month. The good thing is that I am vlogging middle grade March, so my mid-month may just be me filling in the pieces and parts of books that I've read that are not a part of middle grade March. So I will be doing a mid-month this month though. I cannot go in the month of March and not do a mid-month wrap-up, but that's it, y'all. Let me know what you read in February down in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support the channel or looking for ways to follow me on social media, all the links will be down in the description box below, and I'll be back with another video soon. Bye.